Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us at today's webinar. Maybe we just give about a minute to allow all the attendees to be admitted into the Zoom, and then we will start promptly thereafter. Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's cross-border webinar hosted by Franchising and Licensing Association Singapore in collaboration with Singapore Malay Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the Malaysian Franchise Association. We are delighted to have you with us as we explore one of Southeast Asia's most dynamic and franchise-friendly market, the Philippines. With its young population, rising consumer spending, and growing demands for international brands, the Philippines presents exciting opportunities for businesses seeking regional expansion. Our objective today is to help you understand the market landscape, franchising requirements, and how Franchise Asia Philippines 2026 can support your entry into this vibrant market. We are privileged to be joined by an esteemed lineup of speakers who will share both strategic insights and practical experiences. Mr. Chris Lim, Director for International Affairs at the Philippine Franchise Association, CEO of FranCorp Philippines, and Director for Retail and Franchising for the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, will provide a comprehensive overview of the Philippines market landscape, franchise outlook, regulations, consumer behaviors, and the strategic value of participating in Franchise Asia Philippines 2026. Building on this, Ms. Sian Naidu, CEO of Extreme Consulting and 3AMS, master franchisee of Seriously Addictive Meth in the Philippines, will present a case study highlighting what was done right, alongside valuable tips on navigating business culture and forging strong partnerships. After our two esteemed speakers take on questions from attendees, Ms. Nahira, Senior Business Advisor and Lead Project Coordinator at SME Center SMCCI, will provide advisory perspective for SMEs exploring regional expansion. Before I conclude with an overview of how FLA Singapore can support your franchise readiness with WSQ franchise courses and the upcoming Philippines trip. Please use the question function to post any clarifications you may have for our speakers. We will address these questions right after Ms. Sian Naidu's sharing during the Q&A segment. With that, let us begin by inviting Mr. Chris Lim to start us off with his insights into the Philippines market landscape and opportunities. Chris, please.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Trisha. Well, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much to FLA, to Astream, to SMCCI, to MFA for organizing this. Really excited to have you here with us this afternoon. Let me just share my screen. So just for the next 30 minutes, I want to talk a bit more about franchising in the Philippines, as well as a bit more about the market in the Philippines. But just so I know who's in the room right now, can you go to your chat box? I just want to understand, are you into food? Are you in retail? Or are you in service? Just so that I can make sure I can tackle things that are for you. So if you could just put in the chat box, food, service, or retail. So we have Mandy, who's in education. Thank you for that. Shao in food, Carol in service, a few in F&B, Dave and Robin in service. Quite a good, that's great. I see quite a few in education, a few in F&B. Fantastic. Just keep it coming. So at least we know who you are in the room. So just a quick introduction. I'm Chris. I was a former immediate past chairman, as well as a current director for international, the Philippine Franchise Association. And similar to FLA or MFA, we are the home of the most trusted franchise brands. So both international and local brands. PFA has been there for the past 30 years, really helping grow the franchise sector and advocate for the franchise sector in the Philippines. Now, I want to talk a bit about the Philippines. There's a beauty in the Philippines. We're about 7,107 islands, actually closer to about 7,500 islands now. And there are three major clusters. Manila, which is in the Luzon cluster, Cebu, which is in the Visayas cluster, and Davao in the Mindanao cluster. Now, a lot of you may see in the Philippines, it's about a lot of beaches. And I do advise, if you do come down, when you do come down here in Franchise Asia, spend 2 or 3 days, go fly to one of the beaches. Always nice to have fun and both business and leisure. But you know what? One thing about the Philippines, 7,000 islands, just have one branch in each island. You have 7,000 islands, 7,000 branches immediately. So that's something we always tell a lot of the foreign guests who come here. Now, why enter the Philippines? Trisha's touched a bit about it, but first it's English speaking. That's a big help. Most of your manuals will be in English. Most of your training materials are going to be in English. No need to translate that here in the Philippines. I mean, your local franchisee can translate some, but 90% of it, 95%, you can just use purely English. But equally important is that not only do we have a young market, we have a 24/7 market. Philippines is home to a lot of business process outsourcing. So if you think of those in the US, when they call in a call center, it rings here in the Philippines, knowledge process outsourcing, a lot of AI things being outsourced here as well. But they service American clients. So they start their workday at about 10 p.m. and they close at early morning. So it's a 24/7 market here in the Philippines. We're very open to international brands. We have 113 million people and a very young median age. And that actually is quite important. We're very young. On average, it's about 26 years old, the average age here in the Philippines. Compare that to Singapore, which is at about 42, Thailand at about 40, Indonesia at about almost 30, and a world average of 31. So it's a very young population. You enter here, especially, get them young. There'll be a demographic dividend for you for the next 5 or 10 years. I saw so many people in education. Almost half of Filipinos are students. So half of us are Gen Z. There's almost 43 million students here, spread across males and females. So a lot of room for education franchises. And Shen later will talk a bit more about that. It is half Gen Z though, so that also has an impact, especially on your marketing. We are the selfie capital here in the Philippines. So there was a study run by Times Magazine before, and Makati, our business center, became the highest number of selfies per capita. So very tech savvy, very into Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, you name it. The Filipinos are probably on it. Now, I'll talk a bit more about the Filipino consumer in a bit, but let me give you a bit, maybe 3 or 4 slides, a bit more about franchising. The Philippines is one of the most developed franchise markets in the world. It's actually the top 7th largest franchise market in the world. We have 1,800 franchise brands and 200,000 franchise outlets. So the rough math is every brand has about 100 plus outlets. Of course, we have some brands that have 20 outlets. We have some brands that have 5 or 10,000 outlets. So it's quite a wide range, but pretty good average to have about 100, 120 franchises on average per brand. It's spread across local and foreign brands. We are very open. So 1/3 of brands here in the Philippines are international brands. Some of them Singaporean, Malaysian. And food retail service, very active. In younger markets, food is usually a very big part. But here in the Philippines, actually, food is just about half. So we do have a very vibrant retail franchise sector and a fast growing service sector as well. If you look at GDP contribution, it's 7.8%. And we directly and indirectly employ about 2 million people. These are important because franchising is such an important part to the industry here in the Philippines. actually, government does push franchising to Filipinos. In fact, our current trade secretary, so our Minister of Trade, was a franchisor herself. So part of her top 5 priorities of the Department of Trade and Industry in the Philippines, franchising is among those top 5 priorities. So there's a lot of support, especially if you come in as a master. Your franchise source will then have that government support to try to then promote it across the Philippines. By the way, there's a Q&A box down there. If you had questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A box. We'll get to it later on. But if there are new questions that come up, please do put it on the Q&A. Now, I mentioned already the Philippine franchise industry. 44% is food. You'd know some of these brands, Jollibee or Potato Corner. But at the same time, we have a lot of small kiosk brands, which I think is not as present in Malaysia or Singapore. So we have brands that are about 2 or 4 square meters. So that's 20 to 40 square feet. Very low capital, $10,000 capital to open a franchise. And that allows them to scale and enter almost any part of the Philippines. So it's a mix of big restaurants, of fast food, as well as of kiosks. In the retail side, quite vibrant. Some of the fast-growing ones right now, we have Powerhouse Tools. That's a very fast-growing franchise, grew to about 200 stores in 2 years. They're in selling tools, selling things for construction. Pharmacies are also growing in the Philippines. But service is quite interesting. I saw some people in the services, whether it's education, dialysis centers, micro-lending. I think the point here is more the Philippines knows almost anything can be franchised. We always say franchising's birth to death. So we've had brands. I'm with a franchise consulting group here. We've had brands in the maternity side down to the cemetery side and everything in between. So it's literally birth to death. So anything can be franchised. And Filipinos know that. And I think that's why it's fantastic that maybe half of the people here are in food, but another half are in services and retail. Now, one thing that's usually asked are, what are the laws? What are the legal requirements, or are there any legal requirements actually in Philippines? Well, the good news is there's no specific law on franchising. So there's not a franchise body. I know in Malaysia, you have to register at a certain body. And there are some rules specifically for franchising. In the Philippines, the same laws that regulate business will also be the same one that regulates franchising. So franchise agreements fall under the Intellectual Property Code and the Civil Code. If ever there's one thing that most lawyers recommend, is to at least register your franchise, your franchise agreement with the Intellectual Property Office. It's not a requirement, but it's a best practice. What's important though, and I think what's more relevant, is there are retail trade laws. So I think maybe some of you might be thinking, hey, let me open my own store first, or let me open 1 or 2 of my corporate owned before I franchise it out. So there are retail trade laws, especially for foreign-owned retail stores, whether that's food, service, retail. Foreign retailers need a minimum paid-up capital of about $500,000 US. So if you are entering the Philippines, opening your own store, you need to put in a paid-up capital of $500,000. And every physical store that you open should be at least $200,000 of investment. So if you're a very small store, a very low capital, it may be difficult to open your own stores. And I think that's why a lot of people enter through franchising. I won't go into all the details of the legal stuff. Feel free to ask those questions, and happy to share that information. But offhand, all you really need to know is you can enter through franchising here. There's no special registrations that you need to do. And your master franchisee, whoever you find as a partner here, can open as many stores as you want. If you do want to open your own store, there are these slight requirements before you're allowed to open. So minimum investment levels. One thing about Filipinos, we love our malls. Some of the largest malls around the world are actually located in the Philippines, and some of the largest in Asia. We have three very big groups. SM Supermalls is our biggest group. You have the Ayala Group, the Robinsons, and a lot of other smaller groups, specially focused on different provinces. Um, SM by far is the biggest. They have 82. I think actually updated. I think they will hit 100 by this year, or maybe they've just hit that late last year. But we love our malls. So a lot of foreign brands that Shen will show to you later as well. A lot of them, their first stores have been in malls, and highly likely, depending of course on your industry. Of course, if you're in education, then the rental in the malls may not be right. But if you are in food, malls would probably be your entry point. And this is important as well, because when you do visit the Philippines, make sure you do go to some of these malls, because actually the nice thing about it as well, you go to one of the malls, you'll probably already see 90% of your competitors there. So you'll have a great market scanning when you come here to the Philippines. Now, that's really on the franchise industry. So the franchise industry, very vibrant, lots of things happening here. And really, if you enter the Philippines, franchising is really a way to grow, as well as to allow your franchisee here to grow. Do allow them to eventually sub-franchise, or else you would be tying their hands versus other competitors that have been franchising out. Now, I do want to talk a bit about consumers. But if you do have questions on franchising, feel free to add it to the Q&A box. So maybe 5 things to remember about Filipinos. I think first is there's a sachet mentality. You know those sachets, usually I think in Singapore or even I see in Malaysia, those are the free samples. You know, these things, small pack sizes, they give you it in perfume, they give you something. In most countries, that's actually a sampling size. You know, it's free. Here in the Philippines, that's one of the main pack sizes. You know, people buy their shampoos sachets at a time, toothpaste, so many things. I mean, the picture there actually shows shampoo, toothpaste. I think some are food as well. What does that mean? There is that value consciousness among Filipinos, that bundle deals or individually packed sachets compared to large packets. Installment payments, I think when you're in education, I think some of things we learned is, you know what? Few people will pay advance in a year. Some pay in a month. Actually, we run a school here in the Philippines. Some of them pay us weekly. So you have to think of that. I think these are some adjustments that may happen. If you're in food, you know, sometimes you do have these big meals, these big bundle meals. They do like these deals, as well as selling individually packed meals as well. The good news, I saw quite a few food players, is Filipinos eat 5 times a day. We love to eat here. And we love taking photos with the food as well. I'll give you some data. This is data from GrabFood. Quite interesting. It shows you what the 5-day parts are and what people always order. Do note that this is GrabFood, so it's a bit more delivery centric, but at least it gives you a good idea. So when we say 5 times a day, that's breakfast, there's lunch, there's merienda, which is an afternoon snack. We were a Spanish colony, so for you who understand, merienda is an afternoon snack. There is the dinner, and then there's that late night. I'd say not even 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. That's probably until midnight to early morning. What's very interesting, a lot of fried stuff. You know, the top things ordered actually are fried chicken, burgers, pastas, nuggets. So in terms of food, unfortunately for us, we're quite unhealthy here. Might be fortunate for you. Interesting though is you look at beverages. We have a very strong sweet tooth. If you look at one thing there, caramel macchiato, it repeats in breakfast, lunch, merienda, dinner. So coffee is growing really fast here. Anyone in coffee there's a lot of competitors here. But while in some countries, you know, what grows is maybe the lattes, the cappuccinos. Here, caramel macchiato, actually Grab said, among the top 10 foods ordered in Grab, caramel macchiato is one of it. A very sweet coffee. For me, I don't drink it. It's too sweet. But actually, a lot of people order that. So we do have that sweet tooth, and our food tends to go to the sweeter side. one more thing here is not only do we eat 5 times a day, I mentioned a while ago, we have a 24/7 market. So in terms of sessions where people order, actually the top session is dinner. Okay, so a lot of people order for dinner. But the second highest is actually late night. So the second highest time that people actually order for delivery and to eat is late at night. So there is that opportunity. So it is a 24/7 market here in the Philippines. A few more things. So we do love taking photos. So something that's very Instagrammable, quite critical. True for Singapore, true for Malaysia, extremely true for the Philippines. Filipinos are also very family oriented. We have a big population, and some houses have 3 generations there: the grandparents, the parents, and the kids. We're very family oriented. So when we do dine out, it's usually with family, seldom alone. I mean, there are people who eat alone, but it's either with family or a group of friends. That's important with the variety that you have. And the marketing you do, whether it's in food or in service or in education, we do prioritize family. I asked Jollibee, of course, one of our most famous brands around the world. I did ask them because most brands, they focus on one key hero product. You have KFC chicken, you have the Big Mac for McDonald's, and I asked Jollibee, what's your key product? And they said they always have 3 key products: spaghetti, the chicken, and a burger. And I said, doesn't that go against marketing? Marketing is all about focusing on one product. They said, no, because we are about family. And in a family, not everyone likes hamburger, not everyone likes spaghetti, not everyone likes the chicken. So we have to serve these 3 things because then it's bringing family together. The last thing you want is someone buys a chicken and then has to go somewhere else to buy a burger. So they want everyone together. Filipinos are also very value conscious. So there have been brands, there's a shawarma brand, a gyro wrap brand, that their key thing is buy one, take one forever. So they sell shawarma at maybe two Sing dollars, 2 pieces. They grew to about 800, 900 stores. There are coffee chains as well, very mass, maybe one US dollar. And it's buy one, take one, or hamburgers for $1. Now, I assume a lot of you won't play in that segment. Very difficult to play in that segment if you're not a local player with very highly localized supply chain that you've reduced cost. But do know, whether it's buy one, take one, eat all you can, bundle packs, that's very important. The fifth is there's a very strong chance in the retail market if you have a popular celebrity endorser or influencer. So those work. You don't need to get a high-end celebrity, but initial marketing, do have your partners here, your franchisees here, invest really in influencers. It could just be micro influencers, people with 1 or 2,000 followers, but then invite 10 of them. Or it could be one celebrity with a lot of influencers. So everyone has their own strategy, but very, very strong here in the Philippines. There was a quick question about how big is the food halal market. I don't have the exact number with me, but do know that the Department of Trade and Industry, that is their priority, the halal market. Right now, the issue here is there are too many governing bodies, people who give halal certificates, unlike Malaysia, where it's a lot more focused on one. So I think government is trying to fix that. They're investing a lot of money, making sure that local SMEs do uptrade, to upskill, to make their brands halal certified. So there is an opportunity definitely for the halal market. At the same time, there is a gap because I do know when a lot of people here look for halal restaurants, there's actually quite a limited number that they can choose from. Equally important there, I mentioned that the Philippines has the Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. A lot of the Muslim population would be down south where Mindanao is. So there is that opportunity there. Thank you for that question. So that's it. I talked a bit about the consumer. I talked a bit about franchising. Let me talk a bit about the expo. So I guess a lot of us are thinking, how do I enter the Philippines? One of the largest franchise shows in Asia is Franchise Asia. It happens in the Philippines. It's on April 24 to 26 at SMX Manila. That's in Metro Manila, maybe 15, 20 minutes from the airport. And it gets about 50 to 60,000 visitors, 600 to 700 brands. And the brands are a mix of the big local brands, the small local brands, but a lot of the international brands, whether that's Malaysia, Japan, Korea. Um, usually there are big Thailand pavilions. I think the Singapore pavilion is here. You see Taiwan. Um, and I know Trisha and the group later will talk a bit more about the Philippine trip. But do know that a lot of brands that want to enter the Philippines, this is what they come in. This is a vehicle for them to enter. For two reasons. One, I think anyone in franchising or interested in franchising will be in this show, whether it's franchisors, business owners, would-be franchisees. People do fly in from all over the Philippines and actually from all over Asia to come here. So it's a fantastic show to really showcase your brand. I think second, the big reason as well is because this is where you can also see your competitors. This is your market scanning. You will see how vibrant the market is, but you'll see who your competitors, both locally, but as well as, look at everyone else in the other international pavilions, and you can try to benchmark yourself versus them. So it's a great opportunity for you. I think third, it's right beside our largest mall here in the Philippines. So very easily you can go pop by the mall, see really and feel what the local market looks like. And I think especially for international delegates, we do have special activities. Don't worry, you're not gonna be forced to dance. I know Trisha gets angry when we force her to dance, but we'll try to get her to dance again. But there are a lot of networking events. We do have an international networking night where you get to network with both the international delegates, but as well as all the exhibitors. It's a great way to not just understand a bit more about the market, but even potentially meet potential franchisors or franchisees here. In this same week, also, we do have a franchise conference. So those who want to come a day early can also attend that franchise conference, mingle, interact with a lot of the franchisors here in the Philippines. So once again, that's April 24th to 26th. Really a big chance for you to enter the Philippines and to understand a lot more about the market. Maybe my last tip before I hand it over. I did mention that we are 3 island clusters. And when you do come here into the Philippines for Franchise Asia, you will be in Manila. But for some brands decide to bypass Manila. Some enter Cebu directly, which is our second largest city. Or if you're a halal brand, you could go to Manila, be unique, or you could go to Mindanao, Davao, where most of the Muslim population are. So do consider that if you are here for 3-4 days, take a trip down. It's about a 1-2 hour flight. Do visit one of the other islands, both to see the market, but once again, don't forget the beaches. With that, happy to take on any questions later on. Do ask your questions. Our email's there, pfa@pfa.org.ph, but of course you can contact us through Trisha or anyone in the team here. Thanks a lot. If you have questions, happy to answer later on. With that, Shen, I want to turn it over to Shen, who can share to you a lot more insights about working with Filipinos and really growing a brand here.
Thank you, Chris. I'm just going to share my slides, but everybody, give Chris a hand of applause and appreciation, please, whilst I put on my slides. Okay. All right. So if there are no questions for Chris, I'm going to take the conversation forward in a slightly different direction. So Chris and I have been working together for many, many years in the Philippines to work with bringing Singapore brands into the Philippines. So when I am not bringing brands into the Philippines. I'm also a franchise consultant in Singapore, and my company is called Astream. I do see some of the people that I already know in the audience, but today I'm coming in from a different perspective. So I've been invited to share with you a little bit about the actual journey of bringing a brand into the Philippines. Okay, so one of the things that I did in the very beginning was realize what a huge market the Philippines is. And that's when I realized, wow, compared to Singapore, where our outlets can be like maybe a brand could have 10, 20, if it's very big, 30 outlets. In the Philippines, the fact that you have 50 outlets, 100, even thousands of outlets is not surprising at all. And so that's when I started to realize that one way to increase the Singapore brand footprint is to bring our brands into our neighboring countries, and Philippines being my number one focus. And that's when we started to build a lot of relationships with the potential franchisees in the Philippines. And I have to tell you that the Philippines franchise show, Franchise Asia Philippines, was the place that I started my first journey. And that's when I started to exhibit, and that's when I started to meet different stakeholders, different investors, different families, started to understand how the mall culture was, how the people were, and all that. And in the process, of course, as a consultant, we meet a lot of brands, and this is not the only brands that we have brought into the Philippines. But for instance, with Pezzo, when they first became very popular, their brand was brought in by them into the Philippines. There was also Pet Lover Center. You would have seen the Robinsons Group. The Robinsons Group is the franchisee of Pet Lover Center. And then very recently, we also brought a brand called Omote from Singapore into the Philippines. And the amazing thing is that we would imagine that in the Philippines, there would be a huge price differential. Actually, the short answer is that yes, there is a price differential, but it depends on which is the target market you are after, whether it is the high-end market, which is the A or higher B market, or are you going after the masses, right? So with Omote, their pricing in the Philippines is almost at the level of Singapore. So this means that they were targeting the super high A target market. But on the flip side is the fact that they don't focus on opening so many outlets, but they focus on a very niche market. And then, of course, Pezzo, they would then go after the mass market. And so the idea is that they have to open as many outlets as they can, which means that they have to then look at pricing and all that to actually make sure that they are competitive. All right. But I want to also say that made in Singapore brands are very well loved. And I think that as made in Singapore brands, we do enjoy the heuristic of being higher quality, standardized, good integrity. There's a lot of good heuristics that people attach to the made in Singapore brands. So one of the things that I will say is that if you go into the Philippines, you'll find that people do love the fact that we are made in Singapore. All right, but today my topic isn't really about bringing specific brands or specific brands in specific sectors into the Philippines, but rather just to share a little bit more about my journey as a master franchisee when engaging the Filipino market. All right, and the other thing that I needed to say is, after I learned the experience of bringing master franchisees into the Philippines, I couldn't resist the fact that there was such a huge market and I wasn't a part of it. And so after learning about the restrictions that, earlier Chris talked about as a foreigner, what type of markets we can be involved in and what we can't, I then realized that maybe I, as CNIDU, cannot open my own outlets, retail outlets in the Philippines, but I can absolutely open a management company to roll out the franchising parts of the business, so that we could work with local partners and help them operate and open up their franchise units. So that's the angle we took. And of course, that also meant to be able to be successful, I needed to find trusted and good partners that we could work together with to actually build this master franchise successfully in the Philippines. All right. So whilst there are some restrictions, as long as we understand what we need to do to remain compliant, there are opportunities. But as Chris said, the first approach would probably not for you to become your own master franchisee there, because there are rules. So I would still say, let's go to the Philippines and find you the best master franchise fit possible. All right. But today is just to give you a little bit of experience, sharing on how it was for SAM to enter the Philippines as a master franchise. All right. And so SAM, I encountered them in 2010. At that time, they only had one unit, and we started working with them to build all their SOPs, build their franchise strategy, and also to some large extent, we worked with them as a consultant to build the control policies to engage the franchisees with the view of making sure that franchisees were motivated to stay compliant in the long run. Because one of the things that franchisors in Singapore, or actually it's franchisors all over, tend to focus on a lot is how much franchise fee can I get and how much royalties can we negotiate. But the fact is that is all very important. But what's more important is how can we make sure that we are able to extract the value from our franchise in the long run to make sure that our franchisees are motivated to pay us the royalties on time and actually prioritize us as the franchisor. So that's what we worked with SAM from the very beginning. And it's founded by Mr. Samuel Chia and Mr. Lau Jin Long. They were the founders, and they actually worked together to build the curriculum. And from that day onwards, where they met at the golf course, and Samuel, who was a seasoned franchisor, realized that there's such a huge opportunity in education, they got together and set up their first SAM outlet. So SAM is Singapore Math. It's an enrichment program that entertains and serves customers, our customers being students from 4 to 12 years of age. And for those of you who are in education, Chris already did share with you that is one of the youngest populations around. And Filipinos, like all parents, love their children and they are willing to invest in the future of their children. So one of the things that we have been able to enjoy is the fact that parents seriously come to our centers and learn about our programs so that they can put their children in the best classes possible to give them an edge, right? And SAM, since the very beginning of opening in 2010 till today, they have over 200 outlets. And if you look at this landscape, you will see that they are present in over 20 countries already, right? And you can see some of the main markets that they are in are USA, right? And they have 32 outlets there. They've got 43 outlets in Thailand, and then they've got 40 in Malaysia. And in the Philippines, we now have a proud 50 units since the end of 2025. All right. And speaking about my experience as a franchisee, so when we went in as a franchisee, we set up a company called Enrich Asia. And Enrich Asia is a company where we set up to bring education, a Singaporean education systems into the Philippines. All right. So that company is set up in the Philippines. And although I say we have 50 outlets, you can see from my little graph that the journey hasn't been easy. So as a master franchisee, I probably took on more than I could chew because I was ignorant about how hard it might be to build a franchise from scratch as a foreigner, even though I was very seasoned in franchising. So in the beginning, after we took on the franchise, we then, because I also couldn't open up my first outlet myself, we needed to find franchisees. So we had to engage a lot in marketing, and obviously opening that first outlet was not an easy task. But after persevering and bringing my Singapore team into the Philippines and really engaging with a lot of different franchisees, we managed to open our first successful unit. And once we got the first successful unit going, then we focused a lot on bringing all that marketing together to talk about how the experience of the students were. And we tried to make our first franchisee ridiculously successful so that we could then spread the word and so that we could then use that experience and then share with other franchisees. And then we started to get some momentum. All right. And the first year was not so easy. But you can see that we went from 0 to more than 10 units within 1.5 years. But that was also because the parents that were sending their kids to our school were also noticing the opportunities because their children actually had visible results in the after attending SAM programs. So that's what happened, and then we started to work, and you can see that there's a jump over here, and then there was a bit of a plateau. That's because we then had almost like 13 outlets, but we needed to stabilize the franchise operations. So for 1 year, we focused only on that. And then once we got that down pat, we knew how to operate our franchisees' business and how to make them consistently successful. That's when we went on another recruitment campaign. But you will notice that we grew a lot in 2020, and that was a crazy year where we recruited a lot. But guess what? In 2020, something happened, right? It's called COVID. And during this time, between 2020 and 2021, we didn't recruit anymore. But then when COVID was over, we really needed to housekeep because we then needed to handle, people who didn't pay, people who were no longer recruiting students, so on and so forth. And then so we spent another year cleaning up house and culling our franchisees. But then since 2022 to 2024, we have consistently been growing our outlets. It was only in about mid-2024 that we said, okay, it's now looking good. Let's look at renewing our master franchise. So in August 2026, we took on our franchise. And so now in August 2026, we will have renewed our second term of franchising for another 10 years. So now, of course, we have bigger targets and we have more to achieve. So whilst in the end of 2025, we recruited 50, at the end of 2026, we are expected to hit a number of 62. All right, back to what Chris was talking about in terms of, the distribution of the outlets. You will see that our outlets are mostly in Manila, Greater Manila over here. And this is Greater Manila, as Chris was saying. So this is not the only place you can open your outlets. We open also in the provinces. So you can see in the provinces, you have the outlets that look like this, okay? But then in other locations, you can have very beautiful locations in Metro Manila. But most of our outlets are actually in Manila, okay? And basically, to do this, you really need to understand the local landscape. So this year, as a master franchisee, we have to position ourselves now as a profitable franchise. In the past, we were trying to open as many outlets as we can, but now we want to focus that on making sure every franchisee is profitable, because when we're running a franchise, where the money sits is really in the royalties. So we want to make sure that our franchisees are profitable. All right. And now we also care about branding. So we want to be the best math program in the Philippines. Today, we have over 13,000 students, and that's a 53% increase from the end of 2024. And currently, we have 55 active centers, and we are hoping to have 62 active centers by the end of the year. All right. And then we also target to have 38 break-even centers, which means that not all outlets are break-even, because it still depends on the operators within our franchise units. And that's why we watch our franchisees very carefully to make sure that they are as profitable as they can, so that we don't have people who, at the end of their term, not renew. Another thing I wanted to make sure I share with you is that when you go in as a master franchise, you will have a master franchise of maybe 8 years or 10 years, right? But it's important to take note that you need to have a life of the individual franchise as well, because you want to make sure that when it comes time to renew, you actually have enough options to decide whether a franchisee should stay or should you actually let them go from the system. Because if you don't have a life of the franchisee business unit, you end up having to find a lot of reasons to terminate them. So having a life that means a single unit franchise life, will give you more options in terms of making decisions to keep the performing franchisees and letting go of the not so performing franchisees. All right, so these are some of our outlets. This is in 2025, just some of the outlets in the territory. And then the other thing I wanted to say is, when you run your franchise in the Philippines, you should look at working with your master franchisees to support the activities. So in our case, SAM spends effort with us to look through our marketing campaigns, and then as part of the whole engagement, we will then propose to them what our marketing ideas might be for the year, and then we'll tell them how much we're spending and how much we are asking in terms of their contribution and support. So whilst we don't always get everything we ask for, but it does promote best practices, because number one, SAM Singapore knows what we are doing. Number two, we also get to hear their feedback on what they are doing and how we can improve our programs. And number three, of course, important but not the most important, is that we get some financial support in our marketing activities. All right. The other thing in the Philippines that is very important is engaging your customers. So in our case, we have awarding ceremonies, and we make certificates, we give like little trophies and acknowledgements to different people. Why? Because they really appreciate and enjoy it. Imagine during COVID, we had hundreds of students. We did an online event, and we played the music, where we celebrate each student that comes and gets their award. Some people had to wait 200 over names, but they sat within the online Zoom call for 1.5 hours, just so that they could take a screenshot of their child when the child was being awarded and their name was being called out. So even if we cannot do physical events, online events are still very important. So here you can see that now there's no more COVID and all, we had to quickly roll out our face-to-face events, because that really keeps our franchisees involved. And also it gives an avenue for your franchisees to engage their customers as well, and for them to get acknowledged by their customers. All right. So just going to wrap up quickly is that what did SAM get right in the Philippines. I would say that my team did a really good job. But I want to split this into two parts, right? Number one is, what did they get right? So in terms of outlet growth, we needed our core team. And that was not easy because in the beginning, when you're not familiar and you're hiring people, sometimes you're not really sure what kind of people you need and how do you motivate them. And success breeds success. Good behavior breeds good behavior. So we actually took a while to build our core team. So right now, as a master franchisee, our team in Enrich Asia has a very clear set of operational duties, and each of them report to HQ once in 2 weeks, and we actually get very clear reports and everybody knows what they're doing. And another thing that really helps is that you need to motivate your core team, and some profit sharing with them doesn't harm. Then the other thing is in terms of outlet growth, I would say that getting your first winning outlet performing brilliantly is very, very important. So that once you've got that success story, we can then maximize the performance of the outlet so that we can then start to announce it to other people so that we can use that as a use case to recruit more franchisees. Then it's about marketing your franchise. And in the Philippines, what real people say matter a lot. So, interviews with your franchisees, interviews with your parents in the centers, and recording what they have to say and then producing it and then celebrating them is very important because, again, they start to share with each other. And that's how we actually do get a lot of our franchisees. It's really from successful parents and successful franchisees who then recommend other people that they love. And the people who love and trust them will then actually also be more likely to send their children to a trusted educator and also to invest their money in a franchise. So we focus a lot of energy in helping our franchisees become successful. All right. And of course, the other thing that we care a lot about is, growing although we want to grow global, we want to market local. So you need to make sure that your marketing campaigns are using what they do locally. So it shouldn't be forcing our franchisees to follow what we do successfully in Singapore, for instance. You need to listen to what works and what doesn't in their local market, right? So for instance, flyering still works very well in the Philippines. Flyering means, brochures and then giving it out. And then in the Philippines, sometimes my team even print brochures and go to car parks and then put the flyers on, the windscreen of cars. Of course, it's very frowned upon in Singapore, but in the Philippines, it still works very well. Or, hanging those tarpaulins in the wall and in like empty walls and stuff like that, that really works very well as well. And then for us, from an operations perspective, these little marketing tactics of social media, of celebrating wins, celebrating our customers, using local marketing campaigns, marketing tactics, really, really help us to grow from one outlet to another. But another important thing that I wanted to speak to you about is in terms of franchise operations. So in terms of franchise operations, what's important is not just recruiting more franchisees, right? Because it's sort of a circular situation, it's an ecosystem. So once you recruit the franchisees, the next thing we have to make sure is that they are successful. So we need to ensure operations is something we focus on. That means we need to make sure that royalties are paid monthly, not when we can. We need to make sure that the operators are towing the line in terms of compliance. We need to make sure that they are following the discipline that's been set up by our franchisor, which is to make sure that they lock in their students, make sure that they offload their students so that we can make accurate count of the royalty calculation, so on and so forth. So one of the things that SAM HQ does very well is that they control our student logins very carefully. So it's so careful that even when my franchisees don't pay us on time, as a franchisee, I'm still obliged to pay my franchisor, regardless of whether I collected the royalties from my franchisees or not. But that is really good discipline from my franchisor, because then that means that I am more disciplined to make sure that my team collect the royalties from the franchisees. Some people say, oh, let's collect quarterly or half yearly or 1 yearly. What I found is when you let the royalties snowball, it gets very, very, very incrementally difficult to collect your money. So this is a sidetrack, but do make sure when you go into the Philippines, make sure that royalty collections is not something you think is for sure you're going to collect. It's actually something we need to put effort in. Then I want to stress, set a life on your single units. And don't be afraid to cull your non-performers, because the non-performers are not going to be very good for your marketing. They're not going to be great examples. And in fact, when franchisees come in, they tend to want to talk to other franchisees. And so if they happen on a non-performer, then you might actually lose out on opportunities. All right. The other thing is back to my royalty, which is monitor your revenue, right? Because if you don't monitor your revenue, you cannot bill for royalties in time, which means that you are going to allow it to snowball accidentally. All right. Last one, obviously linked back to monitor. So that means out of the 5 points, everything is linked back to monitor your revenue, bill your royalties, and don't forget, collect your royalties. Okay. So I have got a few videos here, but I'm not going to play them in the interest of time. But if you want to get the videos, they're actually available. I can send them to you. But you can write to me at sian@astream.com. I will get my team to send you the video links, okay? But these are just examples of marketing that my team in the Philippines did to actually share about their experience or their opening of their outlets and all that. And these are videos that we take so that we can also share with our franchisor about the work that we do to market SAM. All right. And so that sort of ends the sharing part about SAM. I just have another 2 more slides to go. And this would be about the demographics of the Philippines market. So one thing you need to understand clearly is who is your target market, right? So if you are like Omote and you really are convinced that you want to handle the upper class, the A plus group of people, there are customers for you, all right? So these are high income, high wealth households with strong purchasing power. But you need to be able to differentiate, because this group of people travel a lot. They are global citizens. So you need to make sure that there is a compelling reason for you to price it at that level, and make sure that you are giving that value that they will be happy to part with, because you are then not competing with the rest of the Filipino market. You're competing with the global services and the price positioning, because they are not going to compare you with, like what Chris was saying, the burgers, the sandwich, and the fries, right? They are actually comparing with the offerings from the global market. Then there is the upper middle class, and they split it between B1 and B2. So usually Singapore brands would be targeting the affluent middle class, and maybe the upper class A, probably not always as super A as Omote is, but A and B would be where most of our brands would be targeting. All right. And then there is the emerging middle class, where you have the skilled professional supervisors, small business operators, so on and so forth, right? And for instance, the other segment that's really big is the lower middle class, and that's the largest segment in the Philippines, right? However, for Singapore brands, that means that we would be competing with the local brands who actually do have their business models down pat. And if you're competing on price, you need to make sure that the cost of goods and your value proposition allows your franchisees to be able to compete with the market there. So generally, as far as I know, even if we were selling pizzas and burgers and chicken, we would still be competing at least in the middle class, okay? And for just to bring back my experience in SAM, is that when we sell SAM programs to the students in Manila, we price it at about maybe 40% cheaper than in Singapore. However, when we sell to the provinces, we actually price it down slightly more, because in the provinces, their spending power is lower. So we discussed with our franchisor, and actually, we got the approval to be able to have preferential pricing for the provinces and then keep a specific pricing for Manila or Greater Manila. All right. So when you are entering these markets, you might also want to consider a little bit about how you want to tackle pricing. And last thing is finding the right partners. I think all of us want to find the right partners, and most people will say, it's very easy, just find me the right partner, right? But I think at the end of the day, as a brand owner, what you need to know is, for yourself, what does it take for your brand to be successful in the Philippines? Which means that you need to understand your brand and the landscape well. So is it location? Is it price positioning? Or what is your supply chain? What are you really offering? And I saw some of you have services, right? So what is the service that you're providing? In the Philippines, if you are competing with the local brands, supply chain is a very important part of their franchise. Some of them don't even charge franchise fees. They actually make money from the supply chain, and that's what they call a franchise. So you need to understand how you are going to position your franchise, where you want to position your franchise. I'll just give you a quick example about bubble tea. So there are lots of bubble teas that are already doing fantastically well in the Philippines. It's a very competitive market. And in fact, right, you need to figure out how much is your product, because if your product is approximately 120 pesos and above, then actually you can only be present in the malls. Because if you price yourself any lower, you will not be able to make money on the economics that malls will demand, like higher rental, higher cost of operations, so on and so forth. But and that means that you can maybe open 30, 40, maximum 50 outlets, right? But if your strategy is to open 200 outlets in the Philippines, then that means you might need to position your product at a lower pricing so that you can actually be present in locations outside of malls. So, of course, earlier you would have seen that Chris shared the total number of malls. That might actually end up at about 180, 200 locations. But it's probably unlikely that you will get one of your outlets in all the malls and for all of the outlets to be successful. So it's very important for you to price yourself and understand what is the potential of your brand in that market, all right? And then make sure that once you've got that in your head, communicate these requirements clearly to your franchisees, right? Of course, negotiations are possible, but you also need to know in advance what are some of the non-negotiables in your franchise deal. The other thing is to ensure your franchisee has the capital needed. Okay, and one thing is, rich people doesn't mean that they will invest in your business. So you need to make sure that they're also willing to invest in our business, right? And then the execution is also very important. So I've had so many examples of, when we are Singaporeans, we are so used to saying that, okay, we've signed the LOI, you've paid the money, so the next step is to sign the franchise agreement. And then after you sign the franchise agreement, within a certain amount of time, you have to open your outlets. Yes, it's all very good. We will sign the LOI, you might get your first deposit. But to get from the deposit to your franchise agreement will take some time, because sometimes you can send an agreement to them in the Philippines. It would take time for them to go through it and revert. And after they've reverted, your agreement might say that you have to open within the next 6 months. But don't be surprised if 1 year or even 1.5 years later, it still hasn't happened. And it's not because they are not doing anything about it, and it's not because they don't want to do anything about it. It's just that they are taking their time. So one of the things that you really need to pay attention to is managing the expectations and managing the whole entire process so that it doesn't slip. It's a little bit like the royalty story. And then you also need to know exactly what's needed when you're executing a single unit, an area franchise, or a master franchise. You need to know what to convey to your franchisees upfront. Because when you're operating a single unit, it's very, very different from we are expecting them to run an area franchise. And then if the engagement is to roll out a master franchise, then you need to make sure that your master franchisee is in a place to actually execute the number of outlets that's required for a master franchise to make sense. All right. And of course, another question would be, should you entertain a JV? So those are things that you need to consider. I don't have time to get into the details of a joint venture, but the long and short of it is, even if you were going to do a JV, please make sure it is under the auspices of a franchise structure anyway, because by doing that, you protect yourself and your brand. And other things that are more formal would be, make sure that you check the corporate background, the political connections, because in the Philippines, politics is very exciting. So you want to make sure that, you know in advance what you're getting yourself into, especially if there are any political links. And then, of course, check on their previous foreign partnerships. A lot of our targeted franchisees would have actually invested in other franchises as well. So you also want to learn a little bit more about their experience with other franchises that they have worked with. And then also maybe ask around for industry reputation, because in the Philippines, interestingly, a lot of people know each other, and they at least know of each other. So these are all things that can help you strengthen your approach into the Philippines. Okay, so if Philippines is your next targeted market, and there are questions that you have and you wanted to ask me, you can quickly scan. I have dedicated some time to answer your questions about market entry into the Philippines. Okay. Otherwise, I just wanted to finish off by saying, if you want to go into the Philippines, please join us in this Franchise Asia Philippines in April, because FLA has lined up a very interesting program. And the reason we got started on this was because the Philippines Chambers actually told us about what's really required from a franchise perspective. And one of the things that they brought up was the fact that halal brands are very, very welcome in the Philippines, especially now. And to answer the earlier question about what is the market, I think that the market is somewhere between 6 million, which is more than all of the Singapore population, to, depending on which statistics you're looking at, it can even range up to 10 million. So that is a huge population that we can approach. And right now, I think Chris is also in charge of this vertical of bringing in the halal brands into the Philippines. So I would encourage you to talk to Chris more if you are actually from the Malay community and you want to bring your brands into the Philippines. Okay? And so With that, I think I can end and then hand it over to Ms. Nadira from the Singapore Malay Chamber of Commerce. Oh, sorry, SME Center at SMCCI. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hang on. Before Nahira continues, right, there are two questions from our attendees in the chat. So Rosita is asking whether Philippines is able to import fruits from Egypt, such as navel, oranges, fruits, dates, etc. And then the other question is also on import and export. What are the regulations for exporting products to Philippines? So maybe either Sian or Chris can take
Yes.
that.
I think, Chris, are you in a position to answer these questions?
Not my expertise, but I think in terms of oranges, I'd be surprised if there's an issue importing from Egypt. I know there are trade agreements with Egypt. I know dates have always been a difficult thing to import in the Philippines. But once again, not my expertise, so something that can be checked. I think on that. In terms, I think the good thing though is if you do find if it's about franchising and you're looking at a franchisee here, it's their job to then navigate customs, the regulations, and all these things. Trying to get a lot of that. Exporting is the same thing. Depends on what you export. The processes are very different. And if it's food, there's a lot more. They're a lot more stringent just because it has to go through the FDA. But once again, I think that's why we always encourage to find a local partner because they would either work with an experienced importer or would be able to navigate a lot of these.
Okay, we'll now pass over to Nahira to share more about some of the resources that SME Center can provide for companies.
All right. Thank you so much, Trisha, and Ms. Sian, and also Mr. Chris for your introduction earlier. I think let me just go ahead and share my slides. All right. So I think thank you so much everyone for joining us since about 3:30 earlier. We started off with Mr. Chris from the Philippines Franchise Association. He covered a bit about the market landscape for the Philippines itself, and then Ms. Sian came in to talk about how Singapore SMEs can succeed in Philippines market, and also some of the indicators that you can take note of before entering the market. So for me myself, I'm actually a senior business advisor here at SME Center at Singapore Malay Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I've been a business advisor here for about 9 years now. So we've seen a lot of SMEs grow and thrive within our market in Singapore as well as internationally. So where I come in today under the arm of SME Center is to actually help SMEs to be a bit more prepared when it comes to internationalizing or expanding your brand beyond Singapore shores. Right. So before we start, just a quick introduction about SME Center. We are actually under the arm of Enterprise Singapore, and we have been around since 2006. So making this year actually our 20th year running. We have 5 main centers located within trade associations in Singapore. So Singapore Malay Chamber, Singapore Indian Chamber, Singapore Chinese Chambers. But across all SME centers, we are the ones that are on the ground to help SMEs navigate through their challenges and charter a growth plan together, leverage support as and where needed. So for SME Center at Singapore Malay Chamber of Commerce and Industry, our office is located at Arab Street, Jalan Pinang area, which is actually the closest to Enterprise Singapore's main office at Bugis Junction. To date, our team has about 8 senior business advisors and 2 business development advisors. So these are basically our roles and services. Mainly, bulk of our SMEs get in touch with us for complimentary one-on-one business advisory sessions. This is where we will discuss about your company needs, which stage of the business life cycle you are at, and what are your goals for the next 6 to 12 months. From there, we can facilitate business matching to partners that could collaborate and help you grow locally as well as internationally. Aside from that, we also run workshops and webinars every month and these are mainly capability building workshops where we address different topics under Enterprise Singapore's pillars. It's also a chance for the SMEs that has connected with us to actually network with each other, so that they can grow through partnerships. So, Partners for Business Growth, or what we call PBG, is another specifically curated program for SMEs who are above 1 million annual turnover. So, they will receive a dedicated business development advisor to go more in depth with them about their business growth so that they can accelerate that in the next 1 to 2 years. Our SME Center also runs a specially curated industry-related projects, or what we call GBU, group-based upgrading projects. That is under my arm as well. So we look at those projects to curate them and address a particular industry's need or challenges so that we can uplift the industry as a whole. Right. So coming to today's topic about going global from a Singapore SME's perspective, this is what I'll be hoping to cover today quickly within the next 15 minutes or so. Firstly, why internationalization matters, especially for Singapore SMEs. When you want to go international, right, what are some indicators or signals you can take note of? What is a pre-internationalization checklist you can confirm before you step out of Singapore? And of course, a lot of SMEs also want to know, is there any support for me if I go overseas? So that's where our grant comes in, which I'll touch on later, as well as an internationalization toolkit that Enterprise Singapore has developed to assess a company's readiness before they step out. Okay, so why SME internationalization matters in terms of a Singapore SME context? I think even though the answer is quite clear why SMEs should think global, it's important to revisit the reasons why internationalization actually matter for Singapore SMEs in particular. Firstly, as we know, Singapore is a small market. There is a risk of market saturation for most industry, and there is also a growing demand for overseas. So diversification of risk and accessing to larger markets beyond our domestic demand. Secondly, Singapore as a global hub. So we are in a strategic location. We have an open economy. We have strong trade links and a pro-business ecosystem. Our Singapore brand, as mentioned before previously by Ms. Sian also, is seen as reputable, credible, and trusted overseas. Third, in terms of accelerating your business capabilities, international expansion accelerates your learning, innovation, and upgrading of your competitiveness when you benchmark yourself on a global platform. Fourth, in terms of strengthening your resilience through market diversification, through expansion, you can access to regional value supply chain, which then reduces your dependency on a single market like Singapore. Last but not least, in terms of funding and incentive, as you know, there's a lot of government grant support to go overseas, tax incentive, and also support networks to reduce your barrier to entry for different markets, Philippines included. So opportunities for phased globalization is there because then you reduce your risk by testing markets step by step first before you enter fully. So you can test the market step by step, learn quickly, and then you adjust before you can scale further in that market. Now let's just look at some data that is pulled from Enterprise Singapore and as well as Paul Hyde & Co. about SMEs internationalizing. Despite the global uncertainties in the past 3 years, there is still a steady interest among SMEs to venture abroad. As you can see, Enterprise Singapore actually supported 2,600 internationalization projects in 2024, and this is an increase from 2023. And the support is in terms of market access and business development mainly. And more SMEs actually noticed an overall increase in their revenue from the overseas market. About 56% of Singapore SMEs businesses had over 40% of their revenue. That's about nearly half of their revenue contributed by overseas sales. And this is an increase from 2023. And when we look at the statistics last 2 years ago in 2024, in terms of global market ambitions, right, about 87% of Singapore SMEs were actually preparing to expand their customer base internationally, and 80% were looking to broaden their supplier networks by finding contacts and overseas. So then, how do you know if you are ready to go global, right? So the following hopefully is what we refer to as signals that you might be ready to expand. Firstly, there is a strong domestic position in Singapore, but there is a growth plateau for you. So your growth is steady, stagnant in a sense. So there's market saturation or limited domestic demand. Secondly, competitive differentiation. You have a strong, unique value proposition already established, and this travels across borders. You have your IP check, your branding, your digitalization efforts in terms of operate in your business. Third is in terms of scalable operation, or what we call operational readiness. You have a robust supply chain. You are looking into your quality control. You have a good main capable workforce team to actually help you to expand overseas and look at overseas markets. Fourth, financial readiness. So, as a Singapore SME, before you look into expanding your arm overseas, firstly, you need to know whether you're financially ready. Do you have access to working capital? Do you have a realistic ROI timelines? Are you looking at any funding support? Have you explored that, right? And then fifth, early international interest. That means you have some customer demand from overseas, not a lot, but at least some to get started with, or you have interest from overseas market in terms of partners or distributors ready to engage with you in a conversation. Six is in terms of regulatory clarity. So that's important when you want to expand overseas, be it Philippines market or any other markets that you're looking at, especially, it's important to actually understand what are the export-import rules, certain certifications that or licensing that you need to attain in order to operate in that market, depending on the what do you call that? Your nature of business right now, and do you have any compliance that you need to abide by in that particular target market of choice? So these are some of the six what do you call that, signals that you might be ready to expand overseas. So just taking a short pause here, right? And you guys can actually put in the chat your option. I just want to have some sentiments whether any of you here have seen any of the following signs that your business might be ready to expand overseas. So A, you've hit a growth plateau in Singapore and you want to explore new markets. B, you've developed a unique offering that could be appealing overseas. C, your operations are scalable, but you have yet to explore any international opportunities. D, you've received some interest overseas, but you haven't taken any action yet. And then last one is E, you are still focused on strengthening your business locally in Singapore before expanding. So you guys can just put it in the chat. I'll take a short pause here so that I can understand a bit about where you are right now in terms of the scale of your business and where you see yourself. B, okay. E, okay. So some still focusing on strengthening your business locally. Some already know your unique offering that can be appealing to the overseas market. Okay, some your operations are scalable, but you have yet to explore. Okay, so this is where we can try and help you to navigate through the different ways for you to expand overseas lah. So you can reach out to us to assist you in that. Okay, then how do you go international? So this is where the pre-internationalization readiness checklist come in, right? Some market signals that you might be ready to explore overseas market. Firstly, you've identified a target market and segments within the market, because this helps you to create better market segmentation and positioning. Also enable you to quantify the segments by size, growth, is this audience willingness to pay, some of their pain points, improving your marketing efficiency lah. So you've identified that. Second, you have done your product market validation, which means like your product market fit. This is important when you want to internationalize because validation beyond the Singapore domestic market success is important because it will confirm whether your product or your service will solve a real problem in the new market or is it just for our home market's problem with a different context, right? Thirdly, you look at some of your competitors within the market itself. So like what Chris mentioned earlier, if you're looking at Philippines, very easily you can step into a mall if you're in F&B and you can already easily see some of your competitor benchmarking there, their price points, and what kind of marketing strategies they are using for their audiences. Channel strategy and marketing, your localization defined as well. So different markets, you need to localize your brand differently, how you talk, how you communicate with your target audience. That is also important for you to think of. So how you market in Singapore might be very different to how you market to your potential target audience overseas, right? And then lastly, your entry mode for that market explored. I think there was a lot of talk about franchising opportunities. So, what kind of mode of entry are you looking into this new market, Philippines or other markets? Are you looking at a joint venture? Are you looking at a partnership, master franchise, multi-unit or single unit franchise? So all this is important to reaffirm in terms of your checklist before you enter that market. Next one is team and capabilities, which means how's your human resource allocation? Do you have a person in your company to actually look into the market that you have identified? Does that person have any cultural or language barrier within that new market? This is so that you can look at ways to actually optimize your resources better. Second, most important is financials and your ROI model because financial discipline and your funding posture is actually very important. It clarifies your required capital into that market, your break-even timeline, your currency risk and funding milestones. This can help you improve your credibility with investors or lenders if you're looking into that by demonstrating due diligence and a structured plan. So operations and supply chain reviewed, of course, know about the legal, tax, and compliance risks within that market that you're looking into. You understand what's required to operate there. And lastly, looking into what certain government support for you to expand overseas, such as our MRA grant, right? So that's where the MRA grant comes into play because a lot of SMEs come to ask us about what support is there for them to go overseas. And MRA is one of the most common or one of the only grant that can help you to support in terms of expanding overseas. So MRA in totality, just to touch on it, right? Enterprise Singapore supports 100,000 SGD per new market. So we don't have a cap to the number of markets as long as it's deemed as a new market. And what we mean by new market is that your Singapore company has not had more than 100,000 in sales from that overseas market. Over the past 3 years, we consider it as a new market and you can still tap on MRA grant to expand. And it's actually broken down into these 3 pillars. So not say you can use 100K for whatever activities you like. This 100K is actually diversified into 3 pillars. The first one being market promotion. So if you see here, 20K out of the 100K actually goes into market promo. And what we mean by this is either you are appointing a marketing and PR firm to run social media campaigns for you overseas, or you are actually participating in an international trade fair overseas. So we support the cost of like your event, your booth space, your booth design and construction, the marketing collaterals required for the event, as long as the event is not an event that is under our ESG lead trade fair that they have already spoken to trade association and have a separate thing for it altogether, right? So 20K goes to that. 50,000 goes to business development. So, appointing a consultancy or an agent to actually business match you to overseas partners, or you sending your Singaporean or PR staff overseas to be stationed there as a BD personnel to run the ground for you, find you leads, so we can support the salary. and overseas market setup. So if you know and you have done your research, you have done the on-ground work, and you are 100% sure that this market is a feasible market for you to enter, then the last but not least thing for you to do is actually draft out all the legal agreements for you to incorporate your business there, for you to draft your franchise agreement, your licensing agreement. So that's why we support those costs under the 30K cap. So I won't deep dive much into this, because if you want to know more, you can reach out to SME Center, our business advisors, to actually walk you through, depending on your business life cycle, the stage you're at, the nature of business and the market that you're entering, then we can walk you through one-on-one for this. But just a note that retrospective applications are not permitted, which means that if you want to apply for MRA grant, you just need a quotation, nothing signed, no deposit made yet before you start on the project. And all the projects we will not support more than 12 months. 12 months is the cap. So that's about MRA. Lastly, I just want to touch on the internationalization toolkit, like I mentioned earlier, which Enterprise Singapore has developed. And this is basically to assess your company's readiness before you expand overseas. So you know what are some of the gaps or area of improvements you should look into before you make that step out. And it actually helps you to kickstart your first expansion journey overseas, to plan ahead and address all the challenges before you embark on your overseas activity. So if you can see my screen, right, the toolkit, it's a toolkit that is done online. So with our business advisors, we'll sit down with you and go through it. It's on a question basis, so like MCQ basis. And the toolkit actually covers 4 verticals. Firstly, the company foundation, your company operations, your research knowledge of the market you will be entering, and your execution plan. So before you do the toolkit, right, you should at least have your financial statements, ready, because there will be some questions asking you about your total sales, your equity, your assets. So it's good for you to roughly know these numbers before you do the toolkit with us. And after you do the toolkit, it will take about 30 to 45 minutes max. After you do the toolkit, you'll be getting a customized report sent directly to your email. So this report will actually highlight your next steps and areas for you to look into before you expand overseas. And this is how you can actually leverage or best use the toolkit. A lot of SMEs, they have several market in mind. They say, okay, I want to go into Rwanda, Philippines, UK, US, all at the same time. But the toolkit actually gives you like a bit more of a micro view when it comes to which market you're entering, because the toolkit makes you zoom into only one market that is of the highest priority for you. So that is step 1. And then after which you can internally look at the verticals to be improved or develop a go-to-market pilot plan for this one market. So if Philippines is a market you're entering, then we focus on that, and then we do the toolkit and we see what can be improved in terms of your current assessment of your business here before you go overseas. Subsequently, we can look at the plan and see whether there's any support or funding you can tap on for certain activities you want to do. Then lastly, of course, we can establish a government cadence or quarterly review of these plans, because as we know, SMEs, very high turnover, things can change within 1-2 months. So we always need a quarterly review of your plan. So this is actually my last slide. It just focuses on our SME Center and what we can do for you. As how I mentioned earlier, we are here for you to sit down with you, to talk to you about the challenges that you're facing right now, which markets that you are looking to enter, so we can facilitate that with our business advisory session. If need be, business match you with the appropriate people to help you to scale overseas. And you can also attend our different workshops, seminar sessions in terms of knowledge and capability enhancement. And if there's an alignment in terms of industry project that we are doing under GBUs, you can also participate in that. And for those SMEs that really wants a hand-on, more in-depth guide, and you meet the 1 million annual turnover and above requirement, you can look into our Partners for Business Growth program as well. So just in a nutshell, SME Center is here for you, complimentary basis. We do not charge anything for you to have a sit down to at least make that first step towards your journey overseas. All right. So that's all I have for today. Thank you very much, Tricia. Over to you.
Thank you, Nahira, and thank you all our dear participants for hanging there with us. I do have some executable immediate assistance where you guys can tap on for your franchise journey lah. So please bear with me for the next 5 minutes. I'd just like to share with you guys that FLA, Franchising and Licensing Association, we have about 140 active members across the various sectors. It's not only limited to F&B, but we also have retail, services, fitness, wellness. So any business that is franchisable, like what Chris was mentioning earlier, they are our members, and we are happy to support your journey in franchising your business. Okay, in the middle of the slide, you can see our calendar of activities whereby we have WSQ courses, which are supported by SSG. And we also have various business matching and trade show events. Just now, Nahira covered internationalization toolkit. In FLA, supported by Enterprise Singapore, we have the franchise diagnostic assessment, where we have 5 key pillars to help you to evaluate your readiness to use this business strategy for your business growth. So later you can scan the QR code at the end of my slide to access this, I think 12 to 15 questions, and then a report will be sent straight to your email as well. The next slide will cover the upcoming trips that FLA will be organizing. So I want to give a special spotlight to the Franchise Asia Philippines, which is the main objective of today's webinar, to share with you guys how you can really leverage on this event. But from my sharing, right, it will be on the grants that is available to tap on. We have secured a ESG MSBDF grant, so this will cover 50% of the logistics, such as the booth, the marketing, the flight, the hotel, as well as the market visits. The details I have already shared via the chat link. So if you are interested in the trip, you can actually reach out to me directly or through SMCCI or even MFA. The other 2 trips that FLA have will be to Malaysia in May, and also in Singapore, our FL Asia that is held annually. This year will be our 21st edition. So if you are keen to know more about these franchise exhibition where you can generate leads, feel free to reach out to me. My email address will be provided later at the end of my sharing. Please also allow me to highlight our 9 WSQ courses. So we have 9 different topics, and we run 14 to 16 sessions a year. So these are supported by SSG, where you will receive a skills accredited certificate from SSG. So this is actually helpful for companies that have indicated that they need to strengthen their company resources. These are courses that have given templates and guides. You will be able to generate some templates on the spot within the 2 to 3 days course, facilitated by our franchise consultants. So I highly encourage you to reach out to us to find out more. And I'm very sure that these courses will be very, very helpful for your businesses to improve in terms of branding, operations, or even KPI management. Okay, so without further ado, I just want to end off with thanking everyone for joining us. Chris and Sian for sharing your detailed insights and valuable inputs to our participants. Would like to request for all participants to assist with giving us a feedback so that we can improve for the next edition. And QR codes are provided below so that you can tap on the resources that FLA have to assist in your franchise journey. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to seeing you at our upcoming event in person.